Hey everyone, it's Mike here from Clicked Marketing, and recently I did a video talking about how I'm using AI writers to help speed up content production. Specifically, I use Jarvis for a lot of that. And I got a lot of questions about it. A lot of people sending me messages asking about some additional tips and some ways to keep Jarvis writing decent quality content. I know some people are having some challenges and don't like the content that they're getting from Jarvis. So I thought I'd do another quick video and talk about some of the ways and some of the things I'm doing inside Jarvis to try to produce the best content I can. One thing I want to be clear about, this is not a push button solution. This is not something where you input a little bit of information, hit a couple buttons, and out pops 1,500 words of great written content. You are going to have to go back and edit some content. You are going to have to kind of coach Jarvis along and put up some guide rails, but it tends to be a lot faster than writing from scratch. It tends to produce content good enough that I can give it to a writer, hand it off to a writer then to just kind of edit and flesh out the content, give them a good starting point, and which is a lot less expensive for me than having them write something from scratch. You can also use it for a lot of other things. I'm going to go over an example, kind of writing a blog post, but I use this a lot for ad headlines in either in Google Ads or Facebook. I use it a lot for just generating ideas. I use it a lot for generating title tags inside for SEO on pages. I will have it give me a bunch of ideas that I can use for title tags. And I may not use one of the titles that Jarvis comes up with necessarily, but it gives me some ideas and I can kind of piece together some of the ideas that it comes up with to write good title tags. So in this, I'm going to go through writing a typical blog post that you might need to write. There's a lot of different templates that are provided within Jarvis. I know a lot of people like using these, like the blog posts and kind of going through topic ideas, then creating an outline, then going into paragraphs, and that's fine. You can do that. Some of these frameworks too are pretty neat. The ADA and PAS frameworks are popular among copywriters. It's a framework that's used a lot by copywriters, kind of for sales content, sales writing, and you can use that. And they're great. What I typically use the most though is just the long form assistant and the boss mode inside Jarvis to get the content I want. Some people will go through this blog post workflow. I just start from scratch. And starting from scratch, I'm going to show you, I'm pretty much going to go through kind of similar steps to this, but I just find it's a lot easier to start from scratch. Okay, so here we are inside the writer in Jarvis, and I'm going to show you from sort of the beginning to end the steps I go through to generate a piece of content. I'm going to go through some of this quickly and a little bit quicker than I normally would. And I'm going to pick a random topic here. Normally, I would come into this with a topic in mind. I would have researched the topic, so I have a little bit of an idea kind of where I want the direction of the article to go, or it'd be a topic that I'm already familiar with. In this case, I'm just going to pick a random topic here. Let's do about how to build a deck in your backyard. Actually, you know what? Let's make it even little more specific. Let's do how to build a wooden deck in your backyard. So that's going to be the title of our article. And the first thing I'm going to tell Jarvis to do, and when I say tell Jarvis to do, I use their boss mode inside of Jarvis, which allows you to give commands to Jarvis. If you have the entry level subscription, whatever they call it, that does not come with boss mode. I use boss mode a lot though, and definitely recommend it. So I'm going to tell Jarvis to write an article brief. Okay. Not too bad. And what I do with Jarvis is most of the things I tell it to do, I'll tell it to do it 2 or 3 times and either pick out the output I like the best, or I'll take those 2 or 3 outputs and sort of mix and match and put them together, piece them together to get something that I really like. This again is not a push button solution where you just hit one button and out pops great content. You do have to work with it a little bit. But I'm going to go, yeah, we're going to tell it to do that again, right? And article brief. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this, and that'll be good enough to get us started. Next step I'm going to do is tell Jarvis to write an introduction. And I hate that introduction. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Jarvis to write an article brief for the article we want to produce. So write an article brief about how to build a wooden deck. And I'll typically do this 2 or 3 times until, with a lot of the commands that I give to Jarvis, I do them 2 or 3 times. I look at the different outputs. I'll pick one that I like, or I'll take those 2 or 3 outputs and kind of mix and match and piece them together into something that I like. Don't love that one, so we'll do that again. Okay, that's not too bad. So we'll start with that. And the next thing I do is I'm going to ask Jarvis to write an introduction. Okay. One thing Jarvis likes to do is, by the way, I forgot to mention, I selected the tone of voice here as informative. There's different tones you can use when you're writing. You can tell Jarvis to be witty. You can tell it to be serious. You can tell it to, you can give it a celebrity's name and it will try to sort of emulate that celebrity if it can. Most of the stuff that I write, I tend to go with informative, but there's a bunch of different, and you can hit this button here and it'll take you to a page to show you some other examples of tone of voice you can use. One thing Jarvis will do when you do give a command, sometimes it'll follow that command and then kind of go beyond it, and that's what happened here. It's starting to write a list of things in the article. Next thing I'm going to do though is most of the content that I produce tends to be kind of like lists of things, like 7 tips for how to do this, or a guide on XYZ. And the way that I generate that content is I tell Jarvis to write an outline. And what Jarvis will do is kind of break this article down now into steps. There we go. Choose design style, consider the materials you want to use, find out what permits are required, draw plans for your deck, determine how much lumber or other material you want to buy. Okay, so this isn't too bad. I'm just going to go with this and get started here. Now, in the last video I did, I mentioned that I usually just keep this content description blank, the article brief blank, and instead of giving Jarvis some guidance on what to write. The reason that I do that is because it'll often kind of keep going back to that article brief no matter what section it's writing under, and it will start repeating itself sometimes. The other thing you can do, and what I do a lot, Instead of leaving it blank, I will actually change the content description or brief based on the section that I'm writing under and give it some kind of guide rails in that way of what I want it to do. So, for example, I'm going to change this to choose a design style for your deck. And we're going to make that a heading. So that's going to be an H2. And besides the boss mode to compose content, you can also just tell Jarvis to start writing. You just hit this compose button or you hit Command J. There's two ways that you want to look at doing that. One is you just put the cursor here, tell it to compose, and it will start writing based on the content it sees before it. And that works pretty well a lot of times. The other thing you can do is to start writing first and kind of stop mid-sentence to guide Jarvis, and Jarvis will take over from there. So first thing though, I'm going to change this article brief, right, about selecting a design style for your backyard deck. So we'll do the first step in building your deck, and then I'm going to tell Jarvis to take over. So there we go. And sometimes, just so you know, the formatting won't be exactly perfect. You'll have to kind of play with that a little bit. Not a big deal. Okay. And Jarvis a lot of times will stop in the middle of a sentence. What you can do is either start writing yourself there a little bit and then tell it to take over again, or a lot of times you can just tell it to continue writing. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to go with that. Again, a lot of times I would have done some research on this topic, so I would know a little bit more about where I want to guide Jarvis and where I want to, if there's anything else that I wanted to talk about. Maybe there's another style of deck that I want to make sure is included in here. But just for this video, I just kind of randomly picked something and went with it. So we're going to go into the next section, and we're going to make that a heading also. And then we're going to change this again, tell it to write about picking the best materials to use for your wooden deck. And I'm going to do this. Now, I may or may not include deck in all these headings when I actually publish the content, but I like to put it, whatever topic I'm writing about, when I'm doing it inside Jarvis, I like to put it in the heading, so just to give Jarvis a little more guide so that it doesn't start talking about something else. I want it to be clear that I wanted to write about picking the materials for a deck. And I'm just going to let it write. And it starts building a list. And again, sometimes you're not going to like what it produces. So let's say I don't like anything here. Selecting which materials you are going to use in building your deck. And then I'll let Jarvis take over. And I'm going to see if it continues writing a little bit more for me. Okay. Now, a lot of times, just to let you know what Jarvis will do, is at a certain point, it'll try to go on to another step. So here, it tried to start writing another step. That's happens a lot. Just delete it. Don't worry about it. Move on. So if I wanted to, again, if there's certain materials I wanted to make sure got covered here, I would kind of guide Jarvis. I would start writing about those specific materials and then let Jarvis take over. In this case, I'm just, for the video, just trying to get through this here. And we're going to make this a heading also. Are required for your area when you build a deck. securing permits for building a deck. So before you begin construction of your deck, there we go. And I'm just going to tell Jarvis to continue there. And I don't like that part of the output, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And then I would keep going through each of these other sections. Just to save time, I'm not going to go through each one, but again, a lot of times I'm giving Jarvis, I'm asking it to write, several times until I get the content I want. I'm writing bits myself to guide Jarvis in the direction I want it to go. There's also an option, if you don't like something that Jarvis spits out. Actually, here, let's do an example of this. So we'll make this a heading and write about creating plans for your deck. And I tell Jarvis to write. And let's say I didn't like this. They have a button here you can hit and Jarvis will try again. I don't like that. Okay. So not too bad. I'm just going to tell Jarvis to finish out this paragraph here. There we go. Again, what I would do then is I would go through each of these sections, get to the end. I'm not going to go through the last two here just to save some time. When I get to the end, I will usually change this back to the description that I started with, or put a new description in here that's more general about what the article is about. And then I tell Jarvis to write a conclusion. And get rid of that. There we go. It didn't save for some reason. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of how I go from beginning to end writing a piece of content inside of Jarvis. Again, this is a topic I hadn't researched before. If I was doing this for real, it'd be a topic that either I'm familiar with or I researched beforehand. So I knew some areas kind of where I wanted to guide the article to and where I wanted to tell Jarvis what to write about, and make sure that everything was covered. I would also, of course, fact check everything. This is no different than when you hire writers. You can't just assume that everything they write is factually correct. You still need to fact check it, make sure they're doing that everything is accurate inside the article. Jarvis is not a necessarily factual machine. It will say some things that are not necessarily true. It's more what Jarvis is trained on is writing styles. It's not necessarily trained on understanding every single topic that's out there. So you still have to be the fact checker. And again, this is not a push button solution where you just hit a button and out pops out 1,200 words of great content. So this one thing I want to be clear about, Jarvis or any of the AI writers that are out there that you may use are not a replacement for writers. That's not the way to use them. This is to use in conjunction either for yourself when you're writing content or for your writers to use to speed up the entire writing process. You can, I think you can see from what I did here, this can help to speed up the writing process. I'll still at the end when I'm done with this hand it off to a writer to edit and to go through and check and just to kind of flesh out a little more. But that's a lot easier than having the writer write something from scratch, or myself if I'm writing something, me writing something from scratch. I can use this. You can see in this video, I just spent 10 minutes in here and I didn't even do these two topics, didn't cover them at all, and didn't go through as in depth as I probably would in some of these topics, and we still got 600 words in about 10 minutes. If it's a topic that I've prepared for and that I'm familiar with, I can easily pump out 1,200, 1,500 words a lot of times in 20 minutes, and then edit a little bit for another 10, 15 minutes, and it's good to go. So that's how I'm using Jarvis to produce content. I hope you guys found this video useful, and I'll see you in the next one.